Just start over there, sir.
Okay,
Third time's a charm.
we're gonna restart because I think audio was off. It is now 7 p.m. Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. This is the short-term rental subcommittee meeting. We are at the Southwick Town Hall, Conference Room 2. I'm going to do the roll call for attendance. Doug Moglen.
Still here.
Dick Utzinger.
Here.
Russ Anderson.
Here.
Rhett Banish.
Here.
Kyle Scott. Not see Kyle. Randy Brown, I am here. Alex White.
Here.
Still running. Pat Ordeorn.
Here.
Jackie Sinay.
Here.
Okay, thank you. That we have a quorum. We have 8 members present. First item is public comment. There was a sign-in sheet going around the room. If you are here, please sign in that sheet so we know who you are. Anybody from the public have any comments for the board tonight? Start in the room. Go ahead. Just state your name and address, please, for the record.
Harold Odiorn, 11 White Street. When the details of this proposal came out, I wrote to all of you on this subcommittee to express my position on it. Jacqueline Sinay is the only one who responded, and though we do not agree with each other, I thanked her for responding. Thank you, Jacqueline. Since the home next door to us was listed on Airbnb about 8 years ago, we have been plagued with annoyances, disturbances, littering, vandalism, and general unrest. We never know who the guests are and whether they have been properly vetted. Early on, there were times when 10 people would show up. Lots of young people that would go to Six Flags till closing and then continue partying at the lake late at night. You might think that $200 a night might deter some folks, but when 10 people share the cost, it comes out to about $20 a night per person. Not bad for a cheap night away. We learned that we had to be the police and document all of the bylaw infractions that kept occurring. It seems that it is impossible to enforce the existing bylaw. The problem is that when guests show up late in the day or on weekends or on holidays, the enforcement officer is not available. If you call the police, they will not come because they cannot evict and have no way to enforce the bylaw. The owners of the property don't live in Southwick. It would take them 20 minutes or so to come to the site to resolve any problems. Besides, the male owner throws me the birdie, and the female shouts obscenities and profanity at me. It was our hope that this subcommittee would come up with a resolution that would satisfy all involved parties, especially the Southwick residents, who are the ones that are most affected. What I read in this proposal would remove all restrictions on the rental properties. They would now be allowed to rent these properties by the hour if they so wished. The 31-day maximum should be a 31-day minimum. There is no minimum in this proposal. The best guests that show up are the ones that stay over 2 weeks or over 31 days. And now you would restrict the best guests by putting this maximum on the length of stay. Who would be policing the length of stay and ask the residents to leave if they went over the 31 days? I implore you to vote against the proposal as it is now worded. It would seem that you want to replace a bylaw that can't be enforced with another bylaw that can't be enforced. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other record, any other comments?
I have a comment, and I feel horribly for you guys. I really do. In fact, I know your neighbors who have sold them their house. And I spoke to them, and I'm really sad that they're not here today. Just for the record, what I was told, and I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong, but the incident that you're claiming, people were up late at night, she said it was her college-age daughter, and that she's not Airbnb-ing it anymore because she doesn't want to have a problem with you guys. Is that true, that she's not Airbnb-ing it anymore?
Not true. That fisherman just last weekend.
This isn't really a discussion.
Okay.
for, so
Anyway,
we
so
just
my-
name and record. first
My
person.
comment is I've been doing it for years. These are my neighbors and I.
Name and address.
Brenda lives-
Thank you.
And I have never had any problems like that, and I would never want that for my property, and I've spoken to all the other people in town, which is 4 others, not Airbnb. And I said, have you guys ever had any problems? And they said, no, unfortunately, they can't be at the meeting tonight, but, I'm concerned just like you. I'm concerned for our town and all of our well-being. I would never want a problem. In fact, us on the island had a horrible situation where we had a tenant there for years. Remember the kids? We couldn't get rid of them. They were there forever. We couldn't boot them out, and it wasn't our property, it was the neighbors. And they were throwing bottles in the lake. It was absolutely horrible. So I think the one positive thing is if you have a problem, they're in and they're out and they're gone. So it's not a long-term problem. That's just my 2 cents. Thank you, guys.
Any more comments? Anybody in?
I guess just general.
Name and address.
Jeff Thompson, 4 Grandview Street. So if you look at the map, we're also neighbors with people that Pat and Harold was speaking about. And so, we see firsthand, like, what the situation is best with Grandview. And, we've got a grand view of the whole thing, it's like being in an arena. So some we can vouch for. There was a couple of Ukrainian guys there last year, long-term rental, they put them in there 3 months. And we, right,
Yeah, no
they were
problem.
pretty perfect tenants. But, when you have a lot of people coming through, occasionally, you get people that aren't as, understanding. The one part that I see with a lot of this, because my wife and I are also landlords in Southwick and Westfield. We own 5 houses. So we have a pretty good experience of how the whole inspection thing and how all of that works in practical matters. So practically speaking, you can't get the health department or the fire department or the police department to come in and police these things. They just don't do it, period. So I don't know what you would put in this paperwork to give them the authority to do that. But I can see if there is a situation, there's a legitimate situation, it would be behoven on us to provide the evidence and to drive the whole situation rather than having the town do it. And so what do we have for firsthand information? We've had bad tenants in Southwick. And the bad tenants have opened the water in the basement, opened the doors, frozen the pipes, called the health department on us as bad landlords, refused us to put heat in to provide unfreeze the water pipes so that they have water to drink. Again, turn us in, cut the lock off of our pump house, which is detached from the house. It's in our lease. It's not part of the living property. Cut the lock off and called the fire department. The fire marshal and the health inspector came over and condemned our pump house. We get all this sorted out at our expense. This is a pump house that's been there for 50 years. It was built in 1940, maybe 60 years. We get all this sorted out and come back and ask the health inspector, will you write down, so when we go to court, that we've got something that says we're in compliance? No, he refuses to do it. So this is God's honest truth. This happened. So our biggest concern is how this would get treated if there was an infraction. And you say you could levy a fine, you can do this, you can do that. I think the reality of it is nobody would ever have to pay and we would stop proving that the burden of proof that there wasn't in fact an issue. Well, I would be on the side of, I guess, looking for, looking for what would actually happen. And maybe even have some test cases of it to see and make sure it happens. Inspecting the property when the tenants aren't in there and it's empty is a whole lot different than inspecting the property when there's a party going on. And I can vouch for Brenda because Jack's house, and we named it after the movie Jackass, Jack's house was right next door to us.
And that was a
So-
long-term tenant.
10 feet away, and we would open our door and my wife and I would be in their party. In their party, and we called and called and called and called, and they wouldn't even come across the bridge to look at the property, let alone go on the premises.
So I think what we're saying, is this a short-term rental issue? Is this a rental issue? Is it a homeowner issue? Like, we're all gonna have issues across the board.
Right.
You could have somebody that purchases the house next door to you. That's an idiot. You just said they flipped you the bird.
Yes,
What
and
are you gonna do about that? I mean, they own the house, right? So where do you draw the line between you're gonna have bad people no matter what, if they're short-term renters, long-term
Absolutely.
renters, or homeowners. So
absolutely.
We're,
But, when we,
Just
find
name,
out,
just name and address. for
my
everything.
name is Karin Thompson from Registry. When we find out that our tenants were violating like noise and peace of our neighbors, we did not know. We find out when we evicted them from neighbors, everybody was quiet, did not tell us. Police did not tell us, police was there. After that, first thing we do, we ask neighbors, here is our number, please let us know if they disturb you. That is very right thing to do. If they disturb, so if police doesn't tell us, we will testify. Yeah, they know that we are tenants. And
Sure.
we felt so badly when we heard stories from neighbors. There were like one friend story, another boyfriend, with another boyfriend, police was coming.
They had a brawl in the front lawn in that house, yeah.
Yeah, and after that, we always give our number to neighbors. That is what we can do else. And they will let us know and we will deal with it. Or we will evict them because they violate our lease says no noise, no disturbing of neighbors. That is when you are having a business and not a town, on a town that neighbor will be disturbed. Why? That's not right. You make it money and neighbor loses, they sleep, they cheese, and no, that's not right.
In a practical matter, if the town isn't willing and able to support this and provide the support that's necessary for it, then it's kind of hollow. So, right now as it exists, short-term rentals, right?
That's right.
But yet they continue to occur. And so our concern is if we do have an issue, how would that issue be handled? How would we ensure it be handled? And what if it wasn't handled properly? But we don't want to be in a position, be put in a position where we're begging the government to do the job that they're saying they're gonna do. It's just not appropriate. So honestly, the police will not get involved in civil matters. They consider this a tenant landlord agreement to be a civil matter. So get the representative of the police here. The same probably with the fire department.
Right here.
Okay, great.
So what if somebody
let-
calls and they're a homeowner and my neighbor's a jerk, like, what do you do? Is it different than what if you had a tenant or?
So we don't mind covering that, but let's just finish public comment first. So this is more.
Yes.
time for you to speak.
And even more so than that, the health inspector, because, we own enough properties. Where we got people living in the furnace room, we got people living in the attics, we got people selling drugs out of our houses, and we can't get a health inspector in the house. They will not. And I don't care if it's Southwick or Westfield or where it is. So that's a concern if we call on the phone and say, we think there's a health issue there. And they say, we're not allowed to do that, yet this document says they are allowed to do it, or will do it, or can do it, or may do it. So, you know, it's a matter of, I guess, well, it's like the border now, right? It's like the border. We have laws that say people can't come across our border, yet it's wide open. Nobody does anything about it. So it's difference of passing something and then being able to, and then enforcing it. That's our concern, that it would be something hollow, not empty.
Okay, thank you. Any more public comments on Zoom?
Not I
I
see, Randy.
see no hands raised, okay. Thank you all. We're gonna move on to the discussion, and maybe during discussion, we can touch upon some of the topics that were raised during public comments. So at our last meeting, we had a draft of a bylaw. During that last meeting, there were some comments, some minor changes, I would say, and I did incorporate those changes into this document here. I will tell you what those changes were, just so you're all aware. First, I took out any references to the building inspector. I replaced that with a zoning enforcement officer, so that was throughout the document there was that change. On page 2, paragraph 3C, there was a typo, the last sentence, a butters list within 300 feet, it was with 300 feet. And then in the same paragraph 3's, section 3, paragraph E, it was renewed to, shall be renewed annually upon a past annual inspection. So I added a past. And we talked about that at the last meeting. Everything else is the same. There was I think a split vote at the last meeting. I think it was 3-3. So I asked everybody to provide me some comments where they thought there might be some opportunity to make some changes to this document. The only person that got back to me was Jackie. So I did get this from Jackie. I will pass these around, these comments. She sent me 2 emails. We can talk about those if you want. I hope we have copies, and I need to do some sharing out there. I'll go through these one by one here. So first email was any language that prevents new property purchases from immediately selling up short-term rental. Waiting period, question mark, like you must own property for 2 years, 5 years prior to applying for short-term rental, question mark. So that current property owners are not denied the possibility of keeping their property in doing what they need to retain their property, but avoiding what Kyle Scott and Alex White were concerned with investors coming into town purposely to buy properties for the sole purpose of short-term rental. Anything like that possible. Something to deter but not punish those who need to do what they need to do, and they're willing to do it in a safe and responsible way. So that was the first suggestion from Jackie. And the second one was exception if property inherited, question mark, just looking for a future for my own children and other property owners who might be affected. If the property has been in the family for decades, I like the town that would like to keep it in that way and be supportive of our longtime community members.
Good comment. I like
So those were 2 suggestions from Jackie. And those are the only comments I got from any committee members. So any feedback?
That's a
Comments?
really good thought.
Yeah,
The waiting period,
Yeah.
that's a good thought.
my comment as being a realtor in town is, most people aren't buying these properties for Airbnbs. They're buying it because they want to have a lake house, but they need a subsidy. These lake houses are super expensive, so it's just not cost effective to purchase them. as an Airbnb right now. I think most people are buying these houses because they love the lake, and then they find out how expensive it is to own a lake house, and maybe they're not enjoying it as much. So I like that idea. I think it makes sense.
One other thing too is what we've seen looking at houses before is oftentimes there's an in-law apartment somewhere in the house and they're actually renting that. So that's a possibility that may fit this model. And I don't know how that works into, whether it's a legitimate rental, long-term or short-term, and what's required to do that.
I think it's
In-laws are not allowed.
Not allowed.
by law either.
Yeah, I mean, in-law apartment, so it has a separate kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. And so we've gone to look at houses where people are actually renting that. Now, long-term, I'm
Yeah.
thinking, but, if this were the case, it would also open it up for short-term rentals, right? If it's qualified for long-term, it would be short-term. So, I mean, we could potentially, I guess, have, what, 3 units?
Yeah, because most of these, I mean, all of the Airbnbs are on the lake, guys. There's no other Airbnbs in town. So when Kyle Scott said, oh, people are gonna be swooping into town buying property, there's 5 of us, and we're all on the lake. So people want, and they're all season
Sure.
for summer. People aren't renting in the winter for Airbnb. They want to come and enjoy the lake. So we're talking about 5 properties that are renting 3 months out of the year.
So
Any-
with that, based on this, though, it still goes by number of bedrooms. 2 person per bedroom,
Oh, is that what, okay.
There's a max. Yeah.
plus 2. So if you had 2 bedroom, it'd be 4 people, 6.
Right.
So. Just one comment there, based on some of the open comment sections, and I mean, Rec can speak for the police side of it, but I think the difference versus today versus if this bylaw is put in and we get a complaint on XYZ from a public safety standpoint, there's now a bylaw violation, which there is not even. So when you're speaking about that, we won't address issues on the citizen type of complaints, it becomes different. If, am I right on your end of it? If now there's a bylaw violation, you have something more to act on than you did as of today.
Potentially, there may be something to act on. Majority of the violations will be dealt with by the building inspector, the zoning
Right.
enforcement officer.
But you would at least, you might have a chain of custody, if you would, that you got a complaint and it goes to him.
Mhm.
No different than if we go to a fire call in an apartment complex, like say one of the bigger apartment complexes, and the alarms are malfunctioning, we then have the right to go to that owner and straighten out the alarm situation for the safety of all the residents in that house. The same would apply on this, I'm assuming, that we would have a duty to act to ensure the safety if it was a fire code issue. If it's a public safety issue on the police side of it, I'm not in their world, but I would assume now that there's a bylaw, it gives you something in a process to go to, where there is no process now, because it's just one complaint from one neighbor to another neighbor. It makes it a lot harder to be able to do something.
It would be fines, of course, like they, I don't think we're there, but they.
Yeah, I got that.
Or at least
And,
there's a process for fines now, where there isn't today.
There's a mechanism in here to address complaints as well. It would be, it could be simple, it'd be addressed by the building inspector or the zoning enforcement officer. Or if it's something more significant, then they would bring in police and fire, and there would be a hearing process with those 3 parties and the property owner. And so that process is spelled out in this document.
but I'm concerned that puts the onus of proving it on the complainant. When, we're talking about 11 or 12 o'clock at night with the party going on. And, we can't sleep or should be able to sleep, or whatever the situation might be. Maybe it's, I don't know, I'm just thinking. Then
The immediate fix is harder.
Yeah,
Grant.
well, that's the thing, so we have to deal with it, and if we feel like we call and we don't get the response, like if we don't get the response that we're looking for, and then we have to go to all these hearings, that's not so good for us. We're not in the enforcement end of it. And we don't want to become the policing this. We call up and make a complaint, it should be taken care of, and we shouldn't have to attend.
But wouldn't you call the cops and then the cops would come and have it on record that there was a complaint filed?
At that time of night, I think the
Would that-
dispatcher is the one that gets the
But
call.
you would have a record that you made a formal complaint, so.
So generally, anytime we get a call, if we get like some form of noise call, we get them throughout the year for parties, for, I mean, you get adult parties, kid parties, whatever the
sure.
story might be, right? So we should always be sending someone out there to investigate. What we find and what our conclusion is, unfortunately, it may not be what you're looking for,
Exactly, yes, sure,
but there will be something on record.
yeah,
And, obviously, if you have 5 calls and we'll say a month period or something, obviously, we've got an issue there
I
that
see, right.
we've got to
For-
deal with.
For the past 8 years, there has been a bylaw in place that says no B and Bs. None. So when you call the police department and say there are people as guests next door, we can't do anything about that. They don't even come down.
What if
Right.
it was the homeowner's daughter? What would you do? Would it be the same course of action if it was the homeowner doing it?
So if we got a call where, in your scenario there, you call up and say there's an illegal B and B going on next door to me. Unfortunately, that's nothing that we can enforce. It's not a criminal thing. It's on the civil side, like you were saying earlier.
That's.
It's a landlord tenant type of situation.
In other
So
words,
things like
they-
that are
they
enforced by the
separate.
building inspector, i.e. zoning enforcement officer. So
Mm.
other than logging it, unfortunately, there's nothing the police
Wow.
department can do. We can't
It's
grab them, throw them out, anything like that.
It's like I said before, they come on Friday night and stay for the weekend, and I don't know of any way to get hold of the enforcement officer, and he can't evict them, so,
Right.
so what do? We're stuck. What do we do?
And what if it was a
I'm
monster
asking
tenant? What
you
would
to
you
help
do?
us out. Pat and I
And
go,
we've had it, and we've had.
We've had the long-term
It-
tenant.
You know, it's taken us months and thousands of dollars to get somebody else. The same people cut the well pump going out at the ground, right? So anybody that knows about aquifers, knows about well pumps. This is cut off at the ground, told them that's an irrigation point.
In first 20
And
days
they-
of tenancy.
So now that
one
that
year,
aquifer is poison. If somebody takes poison and dumps it down there, it goes in everyone's drinking water. Think about that. And I can't get enforcement.
Police
this-
only, we call police, we have experience with police. We call
I've been
police,
to your house before.
very nice.
Years ago. It was, I don't even remember what it was for, but anyways, go ahead.
We were afraid that they were aggressive, becoming, the young man was aggressive. If he did this, what he can do with us? So police just escorted us. What, we had to do something, right? Inspection. Yeah, and they talked to them, these people should be here because we had notice for 8 hours, not that we had to come and. And they just said, you be quiet, don't interact with them. They should do some in the basement to inspect the water or whatever. Then second time we needed police again. They said, this time we will do, but next time, it is some fees when you call police. then,
It probably depends on the length of time we're talking about. If it's something quick, it's similar to like a domestic when we've got, say, a restraining order or something. Generally, we give people like 15 minutes, get what they need.
Mhm.
If it's gonna take longer, it's gonna take hours, stuff like that, then generally we'll say, unfortunately, we don't have the personnel to do that. You're gonna have to hire a detail. So maybe that was a scenario there. I don't know without all the information.
But they helped because we really were scared of them.
Oh, yeah, without a
They
doubt, the
have
police
that.
were supportive,
Mm.
no doubt about it. But their hands are tied. as
Our
far
hands are
as-
tied,
As far as they can go, and the health department is the same way. So, that puts a little bit of concern, because we know the practical application of it is. So if there was, I don't know, something that was in there that would give someone teeth to it. Or if that money existed there anyway. And so whoever the landlord was, it's sort of like paying into unemployment kind of. So that the money goes in there in a fund, and if you never use it, you don't get charged. But if people begin to use it, and you see, like you said, if they call it 5 times, then all of a sudden, okay, that has a real impact. I don't know. I think by and large, this situation is a neighborly problem. And like my wife said, we would just go over to our neighbors and we would just work it out with them and say, here is our contact information. If you ever have trouble with these people, let us know. Give us a call immediately and we're gonna get it resolved. Or what are the issues? You know, are they with the cigarettes or smoke or, you know, whatever it is, you know, hanging towels on a fence or whatever the situation is, I would think could be mitigated by the landlord. We would certainly do it.
Yeah.
It's good, it's good landlord.
Yeah, there is a condition here with the application process to provide an emergency contact phone number. For the process.
To the town or
To the town.
to the abutters.
To the town.
Yeah, and that sort of puts us in a kind of in the begging mode. You know, again, where we're begging them at 11 o'clock at night to do something about the tenant, and oh, by the way, nobody's in town hall. So we're upfront about it. We actually provide the abutting neighbors our contact information. And ask them to call us. We had somebody pull a gun in Westfield, pull a gun on it. Yeah.
Short-term rental or long-term?
Long term, we don't do any short term, we don't do any short term. So these people, you'll get a kick out of this officer, they were,
I'm just glad it wasn't in Southwick.
yeah, they were recapsuling like drugs. They were getting drugs from Canadian pharmacies or Indian pharmacies, and they were crushing them up. And they were mixing cocktails, and people were coming all hours of the night from Arizona, Florida. We found this out after the fact, and picking these drugs up. And the way we found out about it was,
We evicted them.
we evicted them, and then the detective called from Westfield, said, do you know how to get a hold of them? And we said, yeah, they gave us a forwarding address so we could send them their money, their security deposit. So, you know, so that was the scenario. And he said, all right, I'm gonna level with you. Everybody in the world was involved in this investigation. They had an IP camera on the telephone pole. So you know how that works. DEA, inspector, postal inspector general.
I like to focus on the bylaws. Sorry, we're getting way off base. here, so let's focus on- Well, I understand. Any more comments from the committee members?
Randy,
Yes, is that you, Dick?
that's me here, yep.
Thank you.
On the first page, number 2, down the bottom is short-term rental. A residential, primary residential. So mix up of words there. Sure, Ian.
I'm confused where you're looking.
Where
Dick.
are you?
Okay, item number 2 on the first page, down at the bottom, it says short-term rental. It says a residential, primary residential or mixed use.
That's on page 2, Dick.
Okay, on my computer, page 1, sorry. No, it's XX.
The first residential.
So the first resident, so it should be a primary residential or mixed use.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
I think this idea of a waiting period is a very good idea.
But that's not gonna help our situation, from what I understood. I mean,
Yeah,
if it's in place now, it stays in place. Is that what the idea is, or did I hear that right, or no?
What stays in place?
I was saying
If they're
more in
if they're
case
renting.
people start coming in and buying up a property that I was
So the
hoping that
ones
they would
that are
do.
illegally in place now would remain in place just because they were there illegally for 8 years. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't,
It's
No,
based
they-
on the property owner,
However,
that was written, how long they've owned the property.
It would still need to register now, which
I
they're
was gonna
not.
say, which is what we're trying to start, is to get everyone who already is doing anything, or anyone who wants to come in to do anything, they would have to start.
Why
trying to limit
wouldn't
it,
there
right?
be a zone where they could legally be zoned in like a commercial area, seeing it is a commercial thing? Why can't they have a zone where they could do this without being in a residential area? And we're on lakefront residential, which we pay a premium for, believe it or not. And now we're being treated like this, you know, like forcing this onto us when we've been here for 47 years. My wife and I do a lot of stuff for this town. We're pro Southwick. I worked on the sewer committee gratis. I'm an engineer. I worked on there gratis for 4 years. I, to this day, say we wouldn't have a sewer in Southwick. We wouldn't have clean lakes in Southwick if I didn't get on that committee. That committee went on for 10 years with nothing being done. I got on that committee and within 4 years, the whole area in phase 1 was all hooked up.
Sadly, I've been
Okay,
on the
so
waiting
I-
phase.
I'm
20
pro
years later.
Southwick. I also have done a lot of work in the cemetery. I think Russ can, you know, confirm that. And Pat has worked for over 30 years on the Southwick Museum, a museum for the whole town. All I'm saying is we don't want short-term rentals next door to us. I'm asking you to turn this down.
Any more comments from the board?
Yeah, Randy, I'll drive you crazy here. Under item 3C, third sentence down says this submittal shall include provide proof. Is that shall include and provide proof?
Yeah, shall provide proof, yeah.
Yeah, but you got shall include provide, so should be shall include and provide. Is that correct?
The submittal shall provide proof. The word include is not necessary.
Okay, thank you.
For communicating on that C, when we're talking about the abutters list within the 300 feet of the property. If the abutters in that process, would an abutter typically get all the information, contact information for that person?
I guess you could dictate that what should be in there.
I would think that'd be at the discretion of the zoning enforcement officer. I wouldn't think you would include phone numbers in that abutters list, but I guess that would be up to his or her discretion.
I thought it was the same thing. I was asking about the 300 feet and I realized that that's more a traditional thing. That's how we do things. But that's where I was saying, if it happened to be me, I just said, let me look up my addresses and each of my different addresses, one was 30 and one was 12. I said, I'm not sure I need to give my information to someone who is seriously 15 acres behind me. You know what I mean? If I decided to Airbnb my house, I'm not gonna, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, and it doesn't matter. What my whole point was that I had I think out there I had 30 abutters. Or no, it's that one, maybe that one was the 15 abutters. So I had 15 abutters out there, 30 around the lake. So I said, my abutters list is pretty big to be giving my information around. And if I have a problem with my house and I was Airbnb it, then I would want you to call, but not if you live 6 streets over and aren't really next to my thing. Do you know what I mean? What kind of a problem would you have that you couldn't go to the town and say, I have a problem with this house, what do I do about it? You know what I'm saying? So that's the only reason why I was like, 300 feet. I'm like, that's pretty huge, but thankfully I'm not in the category, so I don't have to worry. I'm just thinking how we look at things. That's all.
Randy, if you'd like, I can offer a little context
Please,
perhaps.
yeah.
So the discussion points you brought up, and that you're thinking about are on the application side. So the 300 foot number is standard under many zoning applications.
Okay,
So that I think was the root
of
of
why
that
they
particular
said,
dimension.
right, okay,
And I think in previous discussions, the intent was to have the application information come in, the applicant provides the list, and then in this case, I think it's suggested to be the building department would be administering, if you will,
the notice to
the
the
application
abutter?
matter and sending out that notice. So I think the
Okay.
notice is really intended to be, or if I'm speaking wrong here, Andy, just about the information of who's applied, what property is involved, what's being considered, and how it will be considered by the town as a public hearing.
I don't think, is there a public
Yeah,
hearing? I don't think it's a
pardon me, I
public
didn't,
hearing.
I'm speaking out of turn then on that.
Yeah,
But if you will, about the process. So that's really more of an outreach effort to make sure that awareness.
So
happens.
they would be notifying just okay, so they would be notifying the butters that this is what's happening. This person has applied for this short-term rental, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And then they could come and be at the meeting and have a discussion. Okay.
It's
I don't
very-
think there's a meeting.
And thank you, I apologize. for-
There's no
Oh,
there's no meeting,
Okay.
it's just an application.
saying if you have a problem with it,
It's just to
Call
let you,
this
it's
person
just to
at
put
town.
you on notice that that's being done,
okay,
right?
okay.
And perhaps, I don't, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
We talked about it, I think, I don't remember if we talked about it in one of these meetings or not about having a hearing, but I've always equated this. And again, to give some context, I've always equated this to the customary home occupation issue, right? This is no different, right? And I think you heard it here tonight, and I'm sorry that Mr. Odeon left. All of our zoning bylaws today have been based on kind of a good neighbor policy in the last 20 years. They're generally based on a good neighbor policy. And again, the customary home occupation, and I won't go far off because I'll bore everybody to tears, but years ago, you needed to come in front of the planning board and have a public hearing to work out of your house, right? Because the bylaw was crafted when people were blacksmithing and welding and copper smelting and whatever else you did, right? Well, it didn't account for people that worked for a company based in Texas, or they were an accountant or a whatever. And the pandemic frankly proved out that anyone can work from anywhere now for a lot of jobs. So we changed 10 years ago, we implemented the customary home occupation. And the thought behind this process, and I thought we carried it into here too, is that you don't change the outward appearance of your home. And there's no difference between someone carrying on a residence and someone staying there for 3 days. Who cares? Right? But what we're hearing here is some of us have bad neighbors.
Right.
It doesn't matter if they're there for 2 days or 20 year, they
Right.
still suck,
Right.
right? So
It's true.
I'm sorry, I mean, it's fact, right? And I thought the way we have Airbnb today or short-term rental today is, according to the zoning enforcement officer, his interpretation of chapter 185 is if it's not in chapter 185, can't do it. Okay, but back to the matter is, we've had zero enforcement of it for the last 10 years, right? And it goes on. So the point of this bylaw was to kind of, let's try to implement a good neighbor policy here, right? Register these things. Give the building inspector, the fire department, the health inspector, the ability to pre-inspect these places and make sure people are not renting the shed. Okay, and not overcrowding and not creating a nuisance, and setting up a common sense set of guidelines that people all are going to operate under. If we don't enforce our own bylaw that we have today, and I'm going to come back to that because I think it's an important point, it's going to continue to happen, whether it's one of the short-term rental platforms or it's Craigslist or it's just whatever, it's still going to happen, right? And we'll have zero enforcement, and you have people renting their basements and whatever else that you're not supposed to do for health and safety and everything else. This bylaw is supposed to wrap our arms around some of that. What it also tells me is that we're putting our own zoning enforcement officer and building inspector on notice that he's got to do his job. And if there's a complaint recorded from any of the agencies in town, health, fire, police, then he's got to take those into consideration and act upon them. right? It's in the building inspector's job description that he's actually on call, right? I can't imagine that a lot of these would rise to the occasion that we're gonna call the building inspector down at 2 a.m, right, to write a ticket to a homeowner because he had a bad Airbnb guy. But there's nothing saying that the building inspector can't write that ticket 2 days later on Monday morning, right? Because it's the third time that a neighbor has called in, right? So we have a bad neighbor policy thing going on here. Okay, time to write that ticket, right? Could he do that today? Yes. But is he doing it? Actually, no, because it's really under zoning and no one's ever contested that, the fact that it's not in there. Once it's in here and written up as a discrete section of the bylaw, I think it gives it more teeth. That's just my opinion, right? And we've heard tonight, you could have a long-term rental that sucks. You could have a person who owns the house that sucks. Okay, that, I don't know what to do about that. It's not something we can as a government do it. And we've tried. It's been, a lot of these have been, in my opinion, is more of how can the government try to not regulate everyone else's lives here, right? We're gonna tell someone who, they get transferred out of the country, they want to keep their house in Southwick because they know they're coming back in 5 years, right? They can't afford to keep it, but if they could rent it, either on a short-term basis or a long-term, who knows, right? But give them the option to manage their personal property how they see fit, as long as it doesn't bother your neighbor, right? Who cares, right? And I'm not being flippant, but really, who cares, right? If I'm going to work from home now, instead of going to an office every day, and I'm working in an office in my house, who cares, right? I'm not having semi trucks dropping off vending machines and stuff like that. That was one that came up in Customary Home, right? In fact, it's probably beneficial for the neighborhood. A, I'm home. B, it's at least two less car trips a day off my street, right? Coming, going. So that's the way we treated the customary home occupation. And that's how I really thought we were looking at the short-term rental. I did receive Harold's letter as well. But, and I understand the point. In fact, the reason this started, Pat came to us and said, this is ridiculous. The town is having people stay at a short-term rental. It's illegal in town, but that the town is complicit in it. Well, okay, so this is how we got to this point. So I thought we had worked pretty long and hard on crafting this bylaw to get to a point where I think we had, is there room for improvement? There always is, but it's always a compromise based on the people in the room. And this has to go back to the planning board for a public hearing and a wider audience, and then town meeting for a 2/3 vote if it comes in. If it doesn't reach any of those other plateaus, this doesn't even become law. So I'm not quite sure where to take it from here. Just my thought is, I thought we had a common sense bylaw here that's going to address some of it. And frankly, part of it is the building inspector, zoning enforcement officer, it's the same person today, but who knows, in 20 years, that may not be the case, right? Westfield has a code enforcement guy, right? Today, Southwick is the same person, but he's gonna have to step up and enforce this bylaw if there's issues, right? And the other part is we have an inspectional services. It was just funded and budgeted for in this fiscal year. We've actually have a person in that seat at the fire department whose job will be from the fire safety side to inspect these, right? They will do it, right? We have a health agent. He's got the capability to do this stuff, right? That's in the bylaw of what he's supposed to do. They have to do their job, and they will. I have confidence that they will do it.
I kind of thought the same thing of that, at least we had something to start with, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you said, the process after this, we were just a subcommittee, we were just trying to get started something that we could put in front of the planning board that they could, like they said before, they could take it and rip it up and throw it away, and all of our time and effort could be for naught. We don't know, but they could look at it and go, yeah, we like this, we don't like that, we want to change this, but like we said, we're just kind of at a starting point.
And we've had, and you're right, and there's been, a little bit of public feedback, right, coming into these meetings, right? But once you get into the larger, the planning board is your elected planning board, right? So we have one member of the planning board who's on this sub. right? But your elected planning board is in charge of, zoning in the town of Southwick, right? So that's what you've elected them to do. And then it has to go to town meeting to change zoning 2/3. It's the highest vote required under the town meeting to pass a bylaw change. And there may be more public input that comes at a public hearing if it goes that far with the planning board that we didn't even consider. So, but I think where we are right now with what we have is better than what we have today, which is nothing, right? I think it's onerous what we have today. And I don't know that, I think this would be better than what we have today, and I would be willing to send this back to the elected planning board to have wider discourse on it, right? Because our other option is really only, we go back to the planning board and say, we can't come to an agreement, okay? And therefore, it's our recommendation to the planning board that we leave zoning as it is, because we can't vote to outlaw or say you can't do it, because that's what our building inspector has already said that that's the case today in the town of Southwick. So that would be status quo. Fact is, it's still gonna go on. So that's where I thought we were. Now, as far as the feedback here tonight about having a waiting period, I think that probably would be something. It's a little late, to me, it's a little late in the game from where we are, because there's a lot of angles to that, right? You have inheritances and deed recordings and refinances, and how do you determine ownership for a period of time?
Right.
And I think that's a discussion all to itself that the planning board can have at some point
Right.
to try to figure that out.
And I only added that because I thought that's where some of the commission, the people that were on
I get it.
in the town already were saying, we're afraid that everyone's gonna say, ooh, Southwick allows short-term rentals, so I'm gonna go buy a house in Southwick. I didn't think that would be, a thing that would happen, but because of that, I said, maybe we could put a little safeguard in there that would make people who felt that that was gonna happen feel better. That's all. So I'm not saying there has to be a waiting period. It was just a suggestion based on what some of the opposition was.
The other thing, and just, food for thought to that is only because I think that that's fraught with trying to do calculus,
Right.
is maybe, we do not have, or is under state law, is there a maximum number of nights that a place can be rented in a calendar year?
Under the short term.
Under the short-term rental, it's less than 31 days, I understand, right?
Well,
Is
they can
a
flip it.
short-term rental.
They can flip it the next day if they wanted to. Is
Correct.
that your
So
question?
so you could have 365 renters.
Right.
Under the bylaw. So
That's
perhaps
right.
that's a discussion
Right,
point
that's
for
a
the
great
planning board
idea.
and say, maybe 100.
Right.
No more than 100 nights or
Right.
200. Let somebody else figure out the calculus on that.
A lot of the places have 3-night minimums anyway. Not that it changed things, but that's.
What he's talking about, like, you're not gonna rent out every day, you're not gonna be rented
'Cause I-
365.
Right, and I did hear that. People have come to me and said, look, they're in other parts of the country, especially more urban areas. Austin, Texas is one,
Right.
San Francisco is another. People have taken this on as a investment vehicle, right? They're buying multiple units of housing stock and just creating Airbnbs out of them, thereby creating a deficit in the housing market for people who are looking to
Oh, yeah.
rent or
Stay
buy.
there and
right?
live there.
I get, but we haven't
We're
seen.
Southwick,
I
though.
get
It's
it.
not gonna
We
happen.
haven't seen, I know, but we haven't seen that. And I told the people that spoke to me about it, I said, we haven't seen that, right? We would have seen some of it already, but
And those are desirable locations year round. Southwick in the winter,
I
you
get it.
can't rent the place.
We're
in the
talking
winter.
about 3 months on.
I get it. That's my point.
I know. I'm-
But that's,
Yeah.
one thing to, maybe that's one way to discourage it. But again, you start getting into,
How to keep everybody happy, right?
well, that's impossible.
And I
I've been
was
doing
gonna
this
say,
a
that's
while.
That's what I thought we were.
That is
trying to, like,
darn near impossible.
I think that's part of what we were trying to do, is kind of create some kind of balance, try and help, people that are having problems on one direction and people who are trying to do something on another direction. So trying to meet somewhere in the middle and be balanced.
But I think the problem is that with our neighbor, who bought the house, they don't know Southwick, they don't know that this lady and her husband are so respectful in Southwick, even they not, you should still respect. But if I know who are they, I would not allow myself to do this all kind of
Right.
noises. And I saw this noises from my dad. Even she came and asked me, I did not know the reason why she asked me, do you like it? I said, yeah, it's entertaining, we have a reality show here.
Oh, so unfortunately, you got one bad egg, right? You got one bad egg.
Young people late at night and everything. I like noise, I like the neighbors, but people need the peace. And
Yeah,
it
definitely.
not depends on me. I never would, I don't know. I think you should, when you rent it, and it is late, it is activities, you can't say don't be active, it is different area for Airbnb. You will be noisy.
I put on my thing, 9 PM is quiet time, and please respect it. I put it right on the fridge. Please respect the neighbor. Quiet time is 9 PM.
Yeah.
And then, you know, most people respect it, and they say, oh, we gotta be quiet at 9 o'clock.
Or give
you
a
know?
call after 9, if it, please,
I mean, I
day,
think we're all probably really.
I
tired,
won't
but
be
I
late.
say 9.
every night,
Yeah.
call them, it is 9 o'clock, please.
Right.
Do this, 3 days, why not? I will call.
And I tell everybody, my neighbors are watching, they're very close. So I give them a warning, so like, you only have 6 people, because my neighbors are like hot, and they'll let me know, like, they're already tipped off, like, we can't have that extra person.
Because you know, well, Southwick and neighbors, and they just bought and rented after renovation. I saw. They renovated house and rented. They were a family, or somebody came, they had some reunion. It was nice and nice properties really on the lake and enjoy. But I don't know, everything what I read on a letter from Carl, I saw this. I didn't see close relationship or at least I think you should have testimony of the neighbor itself who wants to, who writes the application and asks for rental, to rent a property and make a business. You should have testimony from maybe around 10 neighbors and testify how is she with neighbors, and then she will respect neighbors with her tenants. I don't know. Maybe this will help a little bit.
Oh, thank you.
When they do it by hand raise.
Oh, okay, Alex, go ahead. Alex, are you, there you go.
Oh, hey, I was just wondering, are we gonna, motion for a vote yet, Mr. Chairman?
We have not got that far yet.
Okay,
Still,
Okay,
still.
all right. I'm going to kind of echo what Doug said. I think we put a lot of thought into this document. I think we're at a point where we probably need to discuss the vote. We had held the vote last meeting. We thought we were close and we had you know, a 3-3 tie. We do have a couple changes that were suggested by Jackie. I would suggest holding off on those for at least our discussion, and when we present this to the planning board, we can talk about these items. If it gets to that point, we can talk about these items that they may want to consider for the bylaw. But I personally, I am ready to vote on this tonight. I'd like to hear if others are ready as well, and if we are, I'll entertain a motion to start the process to vote.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Chief?
Ready.
You guys ready? Yes. Okay, anybody like to make a motion?
I'll motion.
So Alex, are you motioning for, what are you motioning for? Just to clarify.
I'm motioning to, accept this draft as a, recommendation, for the, as a subcommittee to the planning board.
I have a motion from Alex. Anybody second?
Second.
Second from the chief. Any further discussions or further motion or motions?
The only thing I would add is that we take Jackie's note and include it and or a maximum number of days in a year that a place could be occupied via one of these short-term rentals. for further discussion
Yep,
by
fair
the
enough.
planning board.
Okay, I have a motion and a second in favor of this bylaw. We will do a roll call vote. Doug Mogul,
Aye.
Dick Utzinger,
Only to push it off to the planning board, aye.
Russ Anderson,
Aye.
Brett Banish,
Aye.
Kyle Scott is still not here, correct? Randy Brown, aye. Alex White,
Aye.
Pat Odiorn,
No.
Jackie Sinay.
Aye.
So that is 7 votes yes, 1 vote no, and 1 no vote from Mr. Scott. Okay, well, thank you all. I think the next step is I will take this document, I will maybe make a little cover letter. And I'll send this to the planning board, and I expect that they'll take this under consideration at a future planning board meeting. I think they need to advertise it 21 days or is that 14 days in advance, probably in the newspaper.
If it, when that time arrives, we'll
Yeah,
take the information and provide to the board to the schedule.
and that's the discretion of the chair of that board to schedule this, the next step. Let's see. What
If
is,
they could discuss this as a board before they decide to advance to that stage anyway. Right.
thank you. Okay, any other new business items for the board? Anything on Zoom? I don't see any hands raised. Like Alex is still running.
I just finished up. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good night.
He's not running away from anything.
Who's chasing them?
Might want to leave that on for evidence.
All right, routine business, approval of our last meeting minutes from 9/13/2022. Those were sent out by email today. By Megan Lightcap, and any motion to accept those minutes as written.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Pat, all right, roll call vote, Doug Moglen,
Aye.
Dick Utzinger,
Abstain, wasn't there.
abstain. Russ Anderson,
Abstain.
abstain. Rhett Banish.
Aye.
Kyle Scott, no vote. Randy Brown, aye. Alex White, he left us. He was also not there, I don't think.
No,
Pat Odiorn,
no, he was there.
yeah, I actually, you're right, Al, my apologies. And Jackie Sinay.
Aye.
So that is 6 ayes for the vote to accept the minutes at our last meeting. I have an item here for future meeting dates. I don't know if we need to meet again as a committee. I think this is it. But certainly we should all be encouraged to go to the planning board meetings when that does take place. Any final feedback or comments? I'll just say I appreciate all your time, and I know a lot of us put dedicated once a month to these meetings. We were here for a couple hours each time, and there was some work behind the scenes that was also done. So I think the way this process played out was how it's supposed to be. We got together as a committee. There were differing opinions from day one. We talked about those opinions. We reached out to the public, did a survey. We got feedback from the public as well, and we incorporated those comments all into one document. And I think we should all be proud of the work that we did. So thank you for all that.
Randy, I think you did a great job. I will recommend you for a chairman for next committee that comes up for the planning board.
I resigned.
How will we hear from here on out? Just only because I don't know. So when we give this to the planning board, how long, do we hear anything back as a committee? Or we just have to follow along with the planning board meetings and see what they discuss about it?
There is going to be no official communication for this committee.
Okay,
So that ends as of today, but yeah,
Okay.
I would certainly keep your eye out, and we can certainly send emails, just FYI emails from the planning board that this meeting is taking place on such and such date and time.
It would be on the planning board agenda.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, so that's the whole thing is I was gonna say, watch the planning board. And
yeah,
see.
watch the planning board. It's probably, I would say at least a month out, just
Okay.
the way things are with the planning board, and then they need to notify, public notice out.
Oh, right, to let them know. So we would hear through that way too.
Yeah, there'd probably be newspaper as a public notification.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes,
Mr.
indeed.
Chairman, first of all, thank you for all your hard work on this. There was a lot of work behind
I
the
was
scenes
just
that you
gonna say,
did, so
you did a
thank you
lot.
very, very much. You've done an excellent job on this. The second, we can ask the planning board, the town planner, also to just include anyone from this group that would like to be on email when it is gonna be addressed as a courtesy, they could notify you. It wouldn't be official, but it would be, you
Right.
know, and, they're gonna have this, so you don't have to
Right.
hawk over the planning board agendas week over week. And then the third thing is that if they advertise it for 7 o'clock, you do not need to be in this town hall before 9:30. Planning board time, right?
Yeah, right.
So-
If it's not a 7:05 hearing, it's.
Yeah, if it's not at 7:05, 9 o'clock, you're good.
Do you need to get a short-term rental to attend the meeting?
There's sometimes the town could have got short-term rental money for some of these planning board meetings. Diane's nodding her head. She's been in a few.
A few late nights, right? Actually, that's right. I did Zoom on some when it was during COVID time, and I think even those were extremely late.
I have a question, maybe, I don't know, if Doug, you know the answer. How do we need minutes for this meeting? How does that get wrapped up?
I'll be to approve them.
I would do them and send them out just to protect yourself.
Usually they write them and they're written, and I don't know that they're ever accepted. But
Okay.
they're written and filed and clocked into the town clerk.
All right, so we'll make sure
Because
that.
it shows that it actually
Yeah.
happened, right?
Can you send them to the committee for approval? I mean,
You can,
changes?
you can, and just, and send them back with.
Paper
with any
trail.
substantive
Just to show,
changes.
yeah.
The good news is today, these days, the minutes are the public record that go on file, but you've got today, you've got the recording and the video to. So the minutes have been incredibly accurate now. Or else you end up in this big circle, right? You have to call a meeting to accept the meeting minutes,
Did
but
you
now
need
you gotta
another
have minutes
meeting?
of that, yeah, so I think they just. The
Hmm.
last ones are written and just signed probably by the chair. So. Well, you know what we can do? I got an idea. I'll make a motion. To
Well, him and.
allow the chair
Okay.
to sign the last minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Oh, another vote. All right. Doug Mogul,
Yes.
Dick Utzinger,
Yes.
Russ Anderson.
Yes.
Rep Banish.
Yes.
Randy Brown, yes. Alex
Randy
White.
was gonna say no.
Hey, I thought about it. perhaps. Pat Odegaard,
Yes.
Jackie Sinay.
Yeah.
All right, that's,
There you go.
all right, so I will do that.
Tidied up that little bit of
That's,
paperwork.
I like that.
So I will work with Megan and the town planner to get these minutes finalized and signed.
Peter Courier was with us for a while. I don't know whether.
He still is.
So
Still
he's gonna have something in the newspaper.
I'm sure he will. Yep.
Yeah.
Sure he will. Okay, anything else before, if not, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So move.
So moved by Pat, here a second,
Second.
all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.